to the Insomniac Show with Nicolette and Brian. We'll get real deep with you, educating, inspiring, and solving problems with some of the most inspirational humans on the planet. Buckle up and come on the journey.
I'm excited. I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Michelle Farris. She is a licensed psychotherapist who specializes in anger management, anger.
Yep.
She's not angry, hopefully.
No.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Michelle. We are so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm really privileged to be on your show. I love it. I love the ease that you interview people on. It's awesome.
Well, before we dive into our topic, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to psychotherapy?
Sure. So because we're talking about anger, I grew up with somebody who raged. And I'm sure I'm not alone. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are going to be saying, yep, me too. And that had a huge impact on me because I decided very early on to not have my anger. Thank you very much. And I literally just said, I'm not having that emotion at all because I thought it was too scary. Because for me, and I know I'm not alone here, anger meant being mean, anger meant abuse. It did not mean healthy expression of frustration. So because of that, I became a people pleaser and I would please, and try to get liked that way. But the problem was when I hit my 20s, when I started doing my own personal growth work, I realized that relationships don't go very well when you don't have all your feelings. And I just kept trying to please others, ignore my feelings. I mean, if you hurt me, I literally would just suck it up. Because I thought that if I brought it up, you would be mad. And I thought, I'm going to avoid that. So by the time I probably was in my late 20s, I realized, ironically, I was teaching, one of my early internships was teaching a 52-week anger management program to men who battered. And I loved it. Other therapists were looking at me like, why do you love it? But I loved it because for some reason, I didn't judge them and I could understand their story because once they told their story, their behavior made sense. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, it didn't mean justifying the abuse, but it meant that 99.9% of them grew up seeing abuse. So of course, they're going to learn it because they didn't have the tools. So for me, by the time I started realizing that okay, sucking up my anger isn't working, I had to figure out how am I going to do this? And even though I had taught the tools to them, I wasn't violent. So some of it didn't apply to me. So I started thinking about, okay, what are the tools that would work for me? And I started really honing in on that. And then I realized, oh my God, it's okay to say, ouch, that hurt. Or, that didn't feel right to me. Can we talk about it? And people didn't freak out. They weren't mean. All that assumption I had wrapped around their reaction was totally false, which I think is part of the reason why we don't do anger, especially women, because if we anticipate a negative reaction, of course, we're not going to do it, right? So once I started realizing that I could have my anger in relationship, I felt a lot more known. And then I put that into my work, and I had always specialized in anger, but this was more personal and this was more practical. I could teach anybody anger, not just somebody who was abusive. And there's a lot of people out there. I mean, I'm sure most of us, I would say, have some anger issues because we're not taught how to do it very well.
I have anger issues. I'm just letting you know.
Yeah. No, I did too. I totally get it.
I mean,
unfortunately, mine don't come in the form of sucking it in. They come in the form of, yelling, banging, and, all the fun stuff that are very unhealthy. So, yes, I have.
Yeah, but
I'm pretty calm. Well, I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to say I haven't been angry or have it,
Yeah, Brian doesn't really have anger issues.
I'm pretty calm.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I mean, here's the way I view anger, right? It's sort of like the Incredible Hulk model. You got Bill Bixby, calm. Or you got Smash model, and then you got the in between, which is like the Gray Hulk, where he gets stuck. And
Yeah.
Mode and Bill Bixby. And that's sort of like, I mean, to me, that's sort of like the gambit, right? It's like nice and calm, super crazy, and then in between, you know?
That's the goal though, to be in between, because the goal isn't not to have your anger. It's how do you do anger without it being scary, mean, or hurtful to you or somebody else? Because some people don't hurt other people, they hurt themselves with it. But no, I love your what did you call that?
The Hulk model of
The Hulk model.
the Hulk model, right? It's like phases, you know, and that's if you're really like, you know, comic book geeky and you're like, okay, who's the great Hulk? You know, where you get stuck in between at one point. But yeah, you got the Incredible Hulk, which is just smash, you know, and then you got in between where he sort of
the in between.
He has the intelligence, but it's sort of like strong like the Hulk, and he's, you know, it's
right. They're going to start teaching that in psychology. You'll see the Hulk model in someone's lesson eventually.
Do I get the, what is it called? Do I get credit for that?
Yes, you do. Yes, we'll give you credit right now. That's awesome, because the visual is really helpful.
Right. Or Stan Lee, or I think Stan Lee created the Incredible Hulk. I guess really, there you go. Yeah.
Well, and sometimes our anger, it can look like that. We're so mad, our face gets red, our you know, the heart rate increases. Sometimes my throat feels like it's closing. I mean, the physical symptoms of anger are intense, which is why, you know, we don't want to downplay it and say that's not normal, but we don't want to get to the point where we're angry to the point where we're the Hulk and we're out of control and we literally can't control what comes out of our mouth at that point or what we do.
So I do say, you know, I know this is maybe a cliche, but I really do. Maybe it's not a cliche because it's real. You know, when people say they see red, you know, I personally see red. You know, it's kind of like this. It's like a color, but not a color. And in that moment, there is no more Nicolette. You know, I am just, I have like stepped out of my body. I am now this thing that's saying terrible things, and you know, I'm being loud and angry, and I don't realize it until like Nicolette's come back into her body, and then she's like, "Oh crap, I probably shouldn't have done that," you know. But in that moment, it's all like red, you know, like one of those red.
Right. Well, there's probably two reasons that that's happening. One is when people say to me, I go from 0 to 100, right? They don't realize the stress before the 0 to 100. So most likely there's a lot going on underneath that you may or may not be realizing is impacting you. Because sometimes if we live at a level of 5 on the scale of 1 to 10 stress, right? That's taxing. But if we know, okay, maybe I need to get that number to a 2, then the likelihood of you exploding is going to be less because you're already starting calm. But if you're always running at a 5, you're going to dip into an 8 like that.
Right. So you say 0 to 100, but you're really operating at like an 80 this whole time anyway. So you're not really going from 0 to 100. You're just going from 80 to 100, right?
Right. Driving at 50 miles an hour, right before it started.
Yeah.
What goes
Brian,
on?
Can you speak up a little bit? I'm having some trouble hearing you.
So what goes on with a person physically, right? That they get in such a state, you know, where they pass the line, like Nicolette said, she's seen red, nothing else matters. Like what's going on with them physically that they hit that?
Brian's trying to figure out what's wrong with me. He's like, I have to work with her. I need to know.
I only saw one unicorn in my life, you know.
I love it. Well, we have that fight, flight, or freeze response. So all that adrenaline, we get flooded. And then we either want to flee, which is the people who literally get up and they have so much energy, they can't contain it, or they freeze and they lock up, or they fight, you know, they want to get into it. But all those stress hormones, you know, your blood is pumping and all the blood is going to your extremities. So your whole desire is to expend that energy. That is not the time to talk things out because you're literally, you got so much going on. It's like that roller coaster of hormones going on. It's really hard to stay calm, but it's also really good to be aware of that because that tells you, hey, you know what? I got to take a break. Now is not the time to talk about something serious.
Use that energy can, like as a construct, right? Go right or go, you know, feelings out or go for a run or the workout or whatever whatever you do to relieve some of it.
Right.
Yeah. I think physical. Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go finish up. Go ahead.
I was going to say that physical exercise is huge with anger, especially if it's rage, because if you've got that, blood pumping and you have to get it out, if you can get it out physically, that's awesome. Some people don't like doing that, so there's other ways of doing it. But the one thing that we used to recommend that we don't anymore is, beat a pillow, beat your bed. We actually don't recommend that anymore in the field, because what happens is if people are doing that, it replicates the violent feeling and it can actually increase it. So we have to be mindful of, like, I've done kickboxing when I'm angry and that's fine, but I don't picture somebody's face as I'm doing it. I may just be, if I'm doing kickboxing, I'm literally expelling that energy, but I'm very careful in where my mind is going. Because the other part, when you asked me about 2 reasons why you may be going 0 to 60, the other piece is our thoughts, because that's where anger really starts, is what is it you're thinking at that moment? Because I guarantee you, before you're pissed off or before you're annoyed, you had some thought, whether it's random or by choice, that is fueling it. And that's the key. If you can catch that initial thought, then you're golden. You're going to be able to calm down a lot faster.
I agree with you on the physical activity. I agree. I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, right? So I love yeah, I love training. And it's one of those things where it's like, I actually feel like that makes me more stable. Like that makes my mood. Like if I'm training regularly, my mood is totally much more stable when I'm expelling that energy that I have.
Right. No, I think
that's why you're not so angry all the time. I don't know. Maybe it's so you don't have anger issues.
Going and then I get it now.
But what I really think is interesting is you talk about earlier, you spoke about people, maybe hurting themselves with that anger, not even hurting other people.
Yeah.
It's really, isn't it physical when we're talking about physical? Is there a physical effect of anger on yourself?
Oh,
like,
yes.
What are the physical consequences of that anger on you? Because I feel drained, right? Is that accurate? Like, it's very draining to be angry all the time.
Yeah, because initially you have that fight or flight reaction, which is where the energy, you get some energy initially, but then you crash. So if you're struggling with anger on a regular basis, that's going to be super taxing on your body, because your blood pressure is going up. You're probably having, you can have digestion issues, stomach ache, headache, even insomnia. They've also linked continued anger with higher levels of anxiety, which makes sense, right? Because if we're already pumped, then that's going to make us feel more inclined to be anxious versus calm. So yeah, I think you're bringing up a really important point.
Do you think
it's nice to have a human subject in this discussion?
Do you think people that are up and down on the anger spectrum, like they're Bill Bixby, then they're the Hulk, then they're Bill Bixby, then they're Hulk? Do you think some people, like, I don't want to say thrive on that energy, but if you're releasing like this, those hormones, or some people, like, have they subconsciously or consciously learn that, okay, if I get angry, I feel alive. I'm just making that up.
Yes.
What I mean? Are there people that get that way?
Oh, yes. Because if they imagine you grow up in a family where dad's really angry, but dad gets what he wants, right? Then the child realizes, hey, all I have to do is be angry and people line up and they do what I want them to do. So if we learn that that's how to get what you want, then you do kind of get addicted to that feeling of, because anger is powerful, right? When I finally started letting myself be angry, I was like, wow, this feels kind of righteous. Like I have a reason to be upset now, but I had to be careful with that. Because part of what happens when we don't have our anger is we can swing to the other side. And I didn't swing to rage, but I swang to, I wanted to be right. And that doesn't help either. But no, I agree, Brian. I think that sometimes people do like that energy. And if you're a man, you get cultured to be angry. Little boys are angry. That's okay. Little girls should be nice and sweet. They shouldn't be angry. So it's like that puts another element in the mix where, men don't get cultured to have more than a few feelings, and that's usually one of them.
Right. And it's like anger or whatever, right?
Yeah. Anger, frustration. It's like, okay, not a big swing.
Right. You got Bill Bixby and the Hulk. That's it.
You just anger, frustration, rage. What are the different? So can you explain kind of the difference between those different variations of anger?
Sure. So there's actually 3 kinds. So there's aggressive, passive, and assertive.
Okay.
Which I really like. I just actually read that before coming on today, because I have different terms for it. But aggressive is pretty obvious, right? We're screaming, we're yelling, we're pretty much out of control. Mm-hmm. Now, the passive person, they are like me, where they would stuff it, but when you stuff it long enough, it's going to come out. So it might come out in a jab comment, like totally indirect that you don't even mean to say, but all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I just can't believe I said that. Or guilt, or ignoring somebody for 2 days. You have a silent treatment. You just go, I'm not even going to deal with you, which is really hurtful, because if you're not talking for 2 days and then you have kids in the mix watching this is really hard. Mm-hmm. So the passive is definitely that indirect route where the other person actually feels crazy, because you're like if somebody says, oh, Michelle, would you be willing to help me out moving this weekend? And I say, sure, don't I always? That's kind of confusing, because I'm saying yes, but my tone isn't yes. Mm-hmm. So it's very confusing. So my friend might go, God, I actually feel bad asking her, but she said yes. Oh, it must be me. But I'm sending out that mixed signal, which is really messed up. You know,
you may not be angry with her, right? I mean,
right, exactly.
You're just angry because everyone asks you to do things, and now someone else just adds things. Now that person really feels crazy. She's like, I've never asked you for anything.
Right. Because if I keep saying yes, 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 when I mean no, that 100th person that asks me, I might blow up at them. And then they might think I'm nuts, but really it's the progression of what I haven't been doing to take care of myself that actually leads me to blow up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, assertive is the goal. And that's where you literally say, I'm really angry, and let me tell you why. Now, the let me tell you why has to be short. It can't be a litany of all the things you've done to me. It has to be something like, I'm really upset about what you said to me last night, or I'm really upset that you were looking on your phone when I was trying to talk to you about the kids. So it's very specific, because if we do that, then one, we're going to keep ourselves from escalating, because if I do a laundry list, I'm going to be more upset. And then the other person's going to receive it, because if I only give them one thing, they're going to be like, oh, okay, I could handle one thing. But if I give them 10, they're going to be like, you're attacking me. And then, then the row really starts. Yeah.
Prompt is usually better. Is that what I'm hearing? Promptly discuss what's troubling you?
Not necessarily, but I'm really glad you're asking that. So it depends if you're in control. If you're upset, but okay, I'm pissed. Like I've had lots of practice with this, where I know I can be upset, but I'm not out of control yet. Mm-hmm. That's the sweet spot. So that's when I can say, hey, honey, let's talk, whatever. But if I'm like so mad, my thinking is like poison, not a good time. I have to leave. I have to do some writing. I have to take a walk. I have to do something first, because if I go into it where I've got a lot of intense negative thoughts about that other person, it's not going to go well.
Mm-hmm. So do you think it's too, a lot of times, I mean, we hear people that have short fuses, right? You hear that expression, like someone has a fuse, but is it really the culmination of things? Like, if you see what I'm saying, like it's, or is it just like they have a short fuse in that instance? Or is it like all the backstory you don't even know about, and you say hi to someone and they go, whatever, you go do this to yourself. Do you know what, like, you know my point, right? Like is it that there's this backstory that you just don't know, right? I mean, what is it? Socrates behind everyone because every man is at war, or whatever it is, or Plato, I forgot who it is. Like, is it just one of those things where you just don't know what's going on in someone else's head, 90% of the time? And some people.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes people are habituated to rely on their anger first, So it becomes a habit, and they don't realize that they just get annoyed super fast because that's their only emotion they have. Right. They don't let themselves have disappointment. They don't let themselves have sad. So everything gets funneled through anger and annoyance. But I think most of the time people don't realize why they're angry. They're just angry. Like if I feel put upon, but I don't know I feel put upon, and somebody asks me something and I react, in the moment I might say, well, gosh, I don't know why I reacted. She just asked me to do her a favor. But if I really look at it and go, well, did I want to do that favor? You know, does this person tend to take advantage of me a lot? Is it a one-sided relationship anyway? And I've just had it. So there, I think more often than not, Brian, there is a backstory. It's just sometimes that's why people come to me, because they can't get to why that is. They just go, well, God, I don't know why I'm angry all the time, but I'm angry all the time.
It's a lot of times it also, being honest with yourself about how you're feeling, right? Like if you don't want to do your friend a favor, just be like, hey, yeah, I'm not really, into it, and unfortunately, I know they may need help or whatever, but it's just like, whatever, you just, whatever, you're not feeling it, like you're not feeling well, or just be honest with yourself and your friend, even snapping at them, because if they're a friend, they're going to understand,
Yeah. And yet that is a risk. And a lot of times, especially women, we might not want to take that risk because we think, well, I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings and make them mad at me. But if we don't ever say ouch, then we really hide who we are. And it gets really frustrating to maintain that.
I don't know. I have no problem hurting people's feelings.
Well, but see, that can be your strength, is that you are so in touch with it. You just have to find ways to.
That's not my strength. Stop it, Bryson.
Yeah. Hulk. She's always the Hulk. Nicoletta's never built Bixby. She's always the Hulk.
What an eye-opening conversation.
That's a talent. Actually, Nicolette is a very kind, sweet human being. So
I do have a good heart.
I totally get that. I can totally see that. There might just be underlying stress or reasons or meanings to things that you need to get to, because you're not wrong for feeling angry. I guarantee you, if you and I sat down and I heard your story and what's going on, I'd be angry too. Really. Yeah. But it's how do you start to think differently, take care of yourself, really figure out, okay, if I am angry, what needs to change? Because people don't realize that's the gift in anger, is that it tells us something isn't okay, whether it's within us or outside in our life.
Do you think, that's a good point. Do you think a lot of times people are angry, blaming other things? It's someone else's fault versus actually looking at it and going, I'm going to choose. Because, I think everyone goes through their life. And at one point I said, you know what? I am going to choose to be a happy person. I don't care. Do you know what I mean? I'm going to choose. That is who I want to be. That is what I'm going to be. And I may have to weed my garden, right? Sometimes you do that. And I think, instead of blaming other things, is it more inward that you could stop that anger? Because, stuff's going to happen throughout your life that you're not going to be happy about, right? And it's really how you deal with it and whether you're going to be angry or not.
Well, yeah. And you made a very powerful choice and conscious choice to say, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose to be happy. But blame is probably the most common form of unhealthy anger that I see. Because if I'm talking about what somebody else is doing to me, I'm naturally going to be more upset because we can't control what somebody else does.
Right.
But we can control what we do. But yeah, I think the blame is huge, especially in marriage and intimate partnerships. We see somebody else's behavior so much easier than we do our own. So it's really easy. And if we learn and see it growing up that mom and dad just blamed each other, tag you're it, of course we're going to do that. I mean, how many people do you know that don't do that? It's pretty much become the norm.
There's almost like a sense of, so when you do look at yourself, what I've seen amongst many people is that, and even in, Facebook groups and what I watch on these, chains, and people almost tell you, like, don't blame yourself. Like, but you play a role, I think like there's too much of this, like, no, it's not your fault. But I do think that you should look at yourself. There should be
Yeah.
like, it's not, no matter what it is, like, unless someone just came up to you and punched you in the face on the street for no reason, you don't even know them.
Right.
Like, there are some things that you've played a role in, even though it looks like it's being done to you, right?
Right.
You're not a victim. I just, I think like so many people try to victimize each other and say, oh, no, what is that? What is that about?
Well, it's easier to blame somebody else because then we don't have to look at ourselves. But I think, especially with anger, and this is why I love teaching the groups when I did that, is because the goal was to help them be accountable, not to beat themselves up. Because when we've been abusive, when we've had anger issues, there's usually issues of shame because we're embarrassed by what we've done. We're embarrassed by what's come out of our mouth. But again, when I hear somebody's story and I hear their background, it makes sense to me. So it's like, can we look at, okay, I can be accountable for my abusive anger or my unhealthy anger, but I'm not a bad person. There's a real difference there. And I think that's where, as a society, we really need to go, because people with anger issues need to feel like they're not bad people, even though their behavior is bad. That actually helps them want to seek help, because if they feel like, when I teach my anger class, I make sure they don't feel judged, because there's no point. You're not going to heal if you're beating yourself up. You got to put the bat down and say, okay, you know what? There is a reason why I'm struggling here. And that has to be honored, and that has to be okay as your starting point.
Do you think also too, like, if someone is in counseling for anger, right?
Yeah.
It's also whoever is in their lives, you don't want to go and poke the bear. You know what I mean? Someone's trying to work on this, right?
Yeah.
The bear and poke it in the, in the eye, right? It's just not going to be good, So it's also, I'm not saying it's their responsibility, but I think also people, if someone is in therapy, you have to be the good person.
Be supportive, as at least.
Say, okay, maybe they are going to snap if I do this or that, and maybe I should let them go through their therapy and heal before I address maybe some issue I have with them, right? Or one of those other pieces, because like it's too soft.
Okay. So do you mean as a partner, not to poke the person with the anger? As an example?
Anyone. Yeah, anyone. You could use it in any relationship, because we all have friends that get angry, and sometimes you just poke because it's funny. Do you know what I mean? And so it's funny to them. But people do this in like a serious nature, or like we were talking about, like who are I forgot what we used, the passive aggressive sort of.
Yeah.
Like, say something, but that person's already having a bad day and they have a short fuse, and it's just going to create this argument or this fight.
Yeah, but that's really good stuff to bring to the therapy or the class, because life is going to keep lifing.
Yeah.
So we have to, that's why what's cool is that my students get the tools, and then they literally come back the next week and say, oh my God, it worked. Because they're going to be tested. I actually want them to be tested. I want their partner to say something that's not okay, so that they can go, okay, name the feeling. What do I need to do? How do I need to handle this? What do I need to do to remove myself? Because that's how they're going to get better. But the other thing with anger is that we have to be willing to do it imperfectly, because this is, the goal isn't not to have your anger or to do it perfectly after the first time, right? That's not growth. Growth is, wow, you know what? I really yelled at my partner. I don't know what happened. Okay, great. Let's talk about that. And we literally dissect everything that happened. And then they get the learning of, oh, I didn't even realize I was upset about that. I thought it was just me exploding. No. So, there's a lot of awareness that goes into this, because if we can be more aware of what our triggers are, then we're going to be able to spot it a lot earlier.
Well, you're talking about some of the things that you do in therapy. Do you have any suggestions for some healthy ways to deal with that for, let's say, the everyday angry person who might be listening? Maybe not as angry as me, but the everyday angry person.
No, definitely. So it depends on what works for you. So the first thing is, if you're like me and you need to expel that energy, I always say, go take a walk. Like, get the heck out of the house. Because what happens is, if people stay in the house and they go in another room, sometimes their partner will go find them, or they go back and go, now I have a great retort, I'm gonna go back, right? Human nature.
I come back inside and I'm like, oh man, I should have said that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why technically you got to leave for at least 20 minutes because the body's response to fight or flight needs 20 minutes to get back to baseline.
Okay.
So 5 minutes is not going to be long enough.
Minutes first too. No, I'm joking.
What?
I said you'll have such better comebacks in 20 minutes. Right?
In 20 minutes, right?
Well, then that tells me that you haven't taken the full time out. I love it. So exercise, calling a friend. If you're an extrovert like me, sometimes I need to call somebody and go, okay, I'm really mad. Do you have a minute? And then literally I just blah, 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 right? Now, some people don't want to do that. They feel like this is very private. They want to do something internally. So those are the people that I say, do some journal writing, practice some deep breathing. I don't know if you've ever been familiar with tapping. It's a way of calming the body's stress. And it literally is like a series of taps you're doing throughout the body. And it's really cool because it literally lowers the body's reaction to stress really quickly. So it just depends on what works for you, whether it's something externally you want to do or something, to calm yourself down that only involves you. So some of this is trial and error to really kind of figure out, okay, what's the biggie that's going to work for you? Because some people don't want to exercise. Some people would much rather meditate or pray or write than call a friend. So, but the cool thing is that there's a lot of different things you can do.
Yeah. And it just seems like you need to ground yourself, right? That's really what we're talking about. You need to ground yourself.
Yeah.
So one of the last things I really wanted to ask about was anger in children, because I mean, from what we just spoke about, as well as when we started the discussion, was really talking about like what you've been taught, also as playing a role. So what is it that we should be teaching our children then to not cause them to be angry humans when they're older?
So the biggest thing is own your own anger. So if I say, and I did this a lot with my son when he was little, I would say, mom's having a bad day, and that would help him, because part of what we want to teach our kids is how do you do feelings? And if we don't show them, because we're their biggest role model, and we don't name it and say, yeah, mommy's frustrated right now. It's not about you. Mommy's just having a bad day. Then they see, oh, mom looks upset and she's matching her words with what makes sense versus I'm not mad. Mommy's not mad. Right? Because then they feel crazy. They feel like, oh, okay, she looks mad, but she's saying she's fine. I don't get it. There's a disconnect. So the first thing we can do is just own it. And if we have anger issues and our kid has anger issues, the first thing I might do is sit down with my kid and go, you know what? I haven't done anger really well. And I realize I need to get better at that so that I can help you. So what that does is that actually gives them permission to be human, right? And to make mistakes. And I mean, because imagine if your parent, let's just say, apologized for their behavior growing up. Yeah, that would have been big. To say, you know what, I really hurt you, or I really yelled at you a lot and it really wasn't called for. That would have changed your life. And that's what we can do for our kids is, I mean, my kid loved it when I apologized. He'd be like, oh, because it gave him permission to go, well, maybe. And then he would like, sorry, mom. It was so cute because he started learning that it was okay to be accountable versus I'm never wrong. Right. And a lot of us grew up with that.
Yeah.
The other thing I would do with kids is just help them name it, because a 2-year-old isn't going to be able to say I'm angry necessarily. But you can say, oh, you look really mad right now. I wonder what you need. Why don't we, get on the trampoline? Why don't we draw an angry picture? Why don't we, if they're older, you could say, tell me why you're upset. And, a 6-7-year-old might be able to say, I'm really mad at Jamie because she, stole my toy. Great. Now to us, it's nothing, right? We're thinking, what the hell? But they don't, to them, it's a big deal. So it's, how do you let themselves name their feelings and help them understand that anger is really okay? Because then they're not going to get into that intense tantruming at 7, 8, 9, 10 that you don't want. You want the tantruming to be a developmental phase, not something that lingers.
Would you say then, and I'm curious because you said naming feelings. So I am, there are times where, we're mothers, we're fathers, we know our children, right? We know sometimes what's bothering them, even when they don't, and sometimes there are a couple of things that are, that may have struck me as maybe the thing that's bothering him in that moment, but I don't know which one it was, right? So, I'll ask him, like, are you mad because so-and-so did this? Are you mad because she's, and I'll ask one of those things. Is that kind of, are you putting words in their mouth? Are you, or is that helpful?
Oh, no, I think that's perfect, because you're not saying you're mad at this. You're saying, I wonder if you're mad at this. Are you mad at this?
Right? Like, it's not like pleading.
Well, it's okay to lead a little bit, but you don't want to tell them how they feel, but you're not doing that. You're asking, you're saying, gee, I wonder if you're feeling this. Right. And then it gets them thinking, oh, maybe I am. Because especially if they're little, they're not going to be able to string those feeling words together yet. But no, I think that's wonderful. I would definitely encourage doing that for sure. Just don't make it be like you're the authority. It has to be more like a curiosity of, I wonder if that's, upsetting you. I would imagine that's really hard for you to be staying home right now and not being able to see your friends. I can see why that's really hard to be on Zoom all day. I mean, that's the one thing I would say people need to be validating their kids' stress right now, because they're going through it too.
Right. Brian, were you going to ask something?
I was going to ask, as we started talking about children, right? Is there tactics for diffusing it? Like, I joke around with my kids, or I'll divert them. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll make a joke about something, and it usually, especially one of them, always makes her laugh. Do you know what I mean? And it sort of changes.
Yeah.
Are there good tactics for diffusion of anger, whether it's kids or adults? I guess it doesn't really.
Yeah. With kids, sometimes you could have a dance party. Like, okay, let's get that energy out and play a song really loud and let them, because that honors their feeling, but it also turns it into something fun, because we want them to be able to have it. You could have them draw what they're thinking, what's upsetting. Even adults do that, now with all the adult coloring books, it can be very powerful to actually draw a picture of why you're feeling upset. But I think it's really important with kids to be able to create space for that, because, it's so hard when you haven't grown up doing that. Like, I grew up stuffing it. So I had to really unlearn that with my son to realize that, okay, his anger is part of what's happening, and it has to be okay. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I was just, like I said, like, to me, like, if someone's angry or upset, it doesn't matter. I try.
Yeah, but acknowledge it, right? I mean, you can divert.
Oh, absolutely.
Acknowledge it first.
Acknowledge it. Yeah. But then, try to help them, right? Help them.
Yeah.
Whether it's like get them out of the bad mood or whatever the case.
Yeah. I think if you acknowledge it first, and then especially like with a tantrum, you might want to divert it into something physical so that it gets channeled. But even just naming it first, oh, it looks like you're really upset. Let's dance it out, and then they're like, oh, but they're learning to understand what that emotion is and how to control it, which is really, really powerful.
Yeah, we do have a lot of dance parties around here.
That's great. That's a very good tool with kids.
Well, that's why I have 5 of them, I guess. I don't know.
Wow. Bless you.
And that's why I only have one. Well, Michelle, this has been a really, I think this is a really important conversation, which is why we were so happy to have you on. And I think a lot of people are going through emotions of whatever form right now. So is there something you'd like to leave us with? Anything you'd like to tell us right now?
Anger is normal, and you're not bad for struggling with it. And you can learn the tools pretty quickly. This is not an issue that takes years and years of therapy, especially if you're really targeting, I need help expressing anger. I need help figuring out why I'm angry. It's not as scary as people might think. Because sometimes I think people think, oh my gosh, I'll never change this because it's so intense or I've had it for so long. But the good news is that the tools are really practical and simple to learn fast. And I just want to give people hope that they can do that.
Thank you so much. Can you tell everybody where they can learn more about you and what you do?
Sure. So my website is counselingrecovery.com. And I have a private practice in San Jose, California. And then I also have online courses and workbooks because I love creating things and reaching more people. During, I guess it was last October, I started a Calming Your Anger Zoom class for 4 weeks. And so I think I'm going to be doing that pretty regularly. And they've been filling up because there's just a real need for people to learn this stuff quickly. So that's on my website too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michelle. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It was really fun chatting with you guys.